Barbara Nissman, and I am speaking to you from my music studio here in beautiful Greenbrier County, West Virginia. Oh, how I wish I could be speaking to you from this stage and we could all be together, but hopefully that will happen soon. But in the meantime, I thought I would introduce you to another one of my favorite composers. This has been a wonderful period for me because I've been pulling out all my old friends, music by my old friends, and today I thought we could use some of the beautiful melodies of Franz Schubert. Now, when I was a little girl, I remember somebody gave me a book of the lives of the great composers, and I remember reading this funny story about Schubert. It seemed funny to me then. Actually, it makes more sense to me now. But the story went like this. It said he went to sleep with his eyeglasses on. And the reason for that was that upon waking the very next morning, he could immediately sit down at his writing desk and write down the melody that had been going around in his head from the night before. And I always thought that was a very funny story, but considering the fact that sadly Schubert died at such a young age, he was only 31 when he died, and left us with such a volume of works. I mean, he wrote over 1,500 works. Over 600 of these were Lieder, which were songs for voice and piano. And let's see, he wrote 9 symphonies, 22 piano sonatas. He tried his hand at several operas, lots of chamber works, lots of, in addition to that, lots of works for the church. I mean, he was so prolific. But his great love, I think, was the songs. You know, he set these beautiful melodies to verses by some of his contemporary friends, poets, and famous poets like Goethe, Schiller. And he also had a quote about his music that I think is so revealing. I recently read it and wanted to share it with you. He said, "My music is the product of my genius and my misery." And even though he wrote these beautiful, sweet-sounding melodies, there's always a bittersweet quality to them. Let me show you what I mean. I'll play for you just a bit from one of his beautiful impromptus, the G flat, and I think you'll understand all the layers that existed behind that sweetness. So this is a few phrases from the G flat. I think that sounds like a hymn from heaven. Well, at least it's a hymn from his soul. And I think you can see what I mean. There's so many layers to that beautiful melody. I always feel the anguish and the pain he must have suffered in his short life. But let me play for you another one of his impromptus, another favorite of mine. This is the last impromptu from his set, Opus 90. And I always call these impromptus songs without words. I mean, in a way, he's asking the pianist to sing these beautiful melodies at the piano. Now, you wouldn't want me to sing this melody for sure, but I'm going to try to sing it for you at the piano. this is beautiful impromptu, the last of the set of Opus 90. And you can tell Schubert loved to repeat. But you know what? When the melodies are that beautiful, you don't mind the repetition. Actually, he wasn't much of a developmental composer, but he did repeat, and then he would change from major to minor, and you would feel it emotionally. You can feel all the layers to his complex soul. And let me put Schubert in context, in the context of music history, because he's quite unique, because he straddles both the classical period and the Romantic period. He was born after Beethoven. In fact, he adored Beethoven, and even was a pallbearer at Beethoven's funeral, and made the request to be buried very close to the maestro, and they did actually follow his request, and he's buried not far from where Beethoven is buried, and of course he really comes at the beginning of the Romantic age, born before, of course, Liszt or Chopin or Schumann or Brahms. So in a way, I imagine him having one foot in the classical period and one foot in the Romantic age. But basically, I think Schubert's great love was the human voice, and in a way, it spills into his pianistic style. I mean, he writes for the piano as if he is writing for a singer, which means that sometimes it's not as pianistic as, say, Liszt would write. But I do want to play for you one of his most virtuosic compositions, actually. It's a composition that pianists love to quote Schubert about, because Schubert tried to learn his Wanderer fantasy, and he was quoted as saying, let the devil play it. I'm sure he can play it, but I can't play it. That's how difficult it is. But it was based on one of Schubert's songs, and that's the reason for the nickname. One of Schubert's songs that was titled Der Wanderer. And frequently, I mean, you would find Schubert, if he weren't in a pub in Vienna drinking with his buddies, he would be seated at the piano, accompanying many of his famous singer friends, and introducing his new songs to a very select public. In fact, they would call these evenings Schubertiads, and Schubert would be accompanying the singers. And of course, this is probably the way he introduced his song, Der Wanderer. Now let me paraphrase the text for you, and I will freely paraphrase it. The gist is, I am wandering, and I have no home, I don't belong anywhere, I have no friends. And the last line of the verse is quite touching, because the last line says, well, happiness is always where you are not. So it's a very poignant song, and let me just play part of the Wanderer for you. Now, this is the song that inspired his Wanderer fantasy. Pianists know it as the Wanderer. And this was a very revolutionary work, because what Schubert did was write a fantasy consisting of 4 sections. I mean, really the equivalent of a 4-movement sonata. But each section has the same theme, and the theme was inspired by this fragment of the song I just played for you. So in the second section, he states that song, and then he writes the most beautiful set of variations to follow, and he gets very dramatic at the end of that second section. In fact, you can understand why he wanted so much to have his operas be successful, because he's writing like a real opera composer. But he starts the Wanderer fantasy using that same rhythm that you heard. but in the opening it sounds like this. And he even uses that rhythm for the second theme in that first section. And of course he fills it up with lots of scales and arpeggios, rather awkwardly written because he really wasn't a virtuoso composer, but actually it's amazing how orchestral his writing is. He wants us really to imitate the sounds of the orchestra. So then this is followed, that first section is followed by the second section, which would be the equivalent of the adagio, and it opens with that beautiful theme and followed by a series of variations. And then Schubert will give us the third section, which is really the equivalent of a scherzo. And that at that point, he converts the rhythm. He gives you a variant of the rhythm, so it sounds like this. So instead of just a variant. And then what he does for the last finale, the last section, we call it the finale, he gives you a fugue subject, and remember we spoke about that when we spoke about the music of Bach, and it sounds like this, of course still based on that rhythm. The pianist has to do a lot of work because he really does make us work all over the keyboard, which is unusual for Schubert because he wasn't a virtuosic pianist. He was more at home accompanying his singer friends. But the person who really adored this work and who played it like no one else was my old friend Franz Liszt. In fact, he adored it so much that he even made a version for piano and orchestra, which of course is much easier for the pianist because the orchestra takes away a lot of the work we have to do as a solo number. But let me tell you about Liszt. What he did, being the wonderful pianist he was, he rewrote some of Schubert's passage work. In fact, there's an edition, and I have a copy of it. It's very interesting how he changes a lot of the passages to make them less awkward. In other words, to fit under the hand. And another change he did is at the opening of the finale. Now, Schubert wrote this. So he just wrote octaves, right? But what Liszt has changed is he's made it bigger, he doubles it. And of course, I couldn't resist doing that because I love that big sound. So Liszt really played this a lot in his concerts and taking this all over the place. And I thought I would walk you through it. I mean, I think I will play the whole thing for you, and I am sure that you will be able to follow that rhythm that keeps coming back. And actually, Schubert keeps pounding at it, so you will have it in your head, definitely. And I also want to say that this piece was really revolutionary for its time because this was the first time that someone had really taken one motive and used it for all four sections. And this piece was written in 1822, 30 years before Liszt wrote his revolutionary one-movement sonata, the B minor sonata. But you can see how the Schubert Wanderer also inspired what Liszt did. So it's really a very important piece in the repertoire, even though it's not really typical of Schubert's style, but pianists love to try and master this, and it's really fun to play, and it will be fun to share with you now. understand Schubert's remark, and you understand why I spend so much time in my studio trying to get a little closer and chipping away. Actually, it's been fun to pull out this piece to share with you. It's a terrific piece, it really is. This is something I played in my young student days, but it's wonderful to bring these things back to life and discover more than we thought was there in the beginning. And of course, it's wonderful to be sharing this with you. So till we meet again, in the meantime, please keep well, keep safe, and keep listening to beautiful music, because you know, it really does help. I know it's keeping me sane and happy in these crazy times. So till we meet again, and thank you so much.